She was the perfect caregiver until her patients started dying and leaving her millions. November 3rd, 2023, 6:47 a.m. Manhattan's Upper East Side. FBI agents surrounded a luxury apartment building as dawn broke over Central Park. Inside the penthouse, Rachel Foster was preparing breakfast for her latest patient, 89-year-old billionaire Charles Pemberton. Rachel didn't hear them coming. She was humming softly, cutting pills with precision, when agents burst through the door. "Rachel Foster, you're under arrest for the murders of Harold Wetman, Margaret Ashford, James Rothell, Eleanor Hancock, and William Thornton." The pill cutter clattered to the marble floor. Charles Pemberton watched from his wheelchair as his beloved caregiver, the woman who'd nursed him for 8 months, who knew his medications better than he did, was handcuffed and led away. Rachel Foster looked nothing like a serial killer. At 42, she had kind eyes, gentle hands, and a warm smile that put families at ease. 20 years as a registered nurse, glowing recommendations, the woman families trusted with their most vulnerable loved ones. But over 3 years, 5 of her elderly patients had died, and each one had left her a fortune. Harold Wetman, $3.2 million. Margaret Ashford, $4.7 million. James Rothell, $2.8 million. Eleanor Hancock, $5.1 million. William Thornton, $3.9 million. Nearly $20 million from 5 different families, all dead from natural causes. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. These weren't random victims. Each fortune had been built on blood. Railroad barons who worked Chinese immigrants to death, textile magnates who locked children in factories, plantation owners whose wealth came from slavery, mining tycoons who let workers suffocate in their tunnels. This wasn't about money. This was about justice. At least, that's what she told herself. Rachel Foster had spent 20 years building the perfect resume. Columbia University School of Nursing, specialized certifications in geriatric and hospice care, a spotless record with New York's most exclusive home healthcare agencies. Rachel was an angel sent from heaven, wrote one family in a glowing recommendation. She cared for my mother in her final months with such compassion. Mom said Rachel was like the daughter she never had. Another testimonial states, Rachel became part of our family. She knew Dad's needs better than we did. When he passed, we were devastated, but grateful he had Rachel by his side. These weren't fake reviews. Rachel genuinely cared for her patients. She memorized their medications, learned their favorite songs, sat with them through sleepless nights. She was everything a family could want in a caregiver, which really made her the perfect killer. Rachel's methods were tactical. She worked exclusively through Pinnacle Home Care, an agency that served Manhattan's wealthiest families. The eligible criteria? You should have a minimum net worth of $50 million. The application process was rigorous. Background checks, references, psychological evaluations. Rachel passed them all. Once placed with a family, Rachel would begin her research. Not medical research, historical research. She'd express interest in family photos, ask about ancestors, and claim genealogy as a hobby. Families loved sharing their histories with someone who seemed genuinely interested. Your great-grandfather built the Transcontinental Railroad? How fascinating. But Rachel wasn't fascinated. She was hunting. Her first victim was Harold Wetman, 87, heir to a railroad fortune worth billions. Harold loved telling stories about his great-grandfather, the man who connected America. He'd show Rachel old photographs of Chinese workers blasting through mountains, building tracks across impossible terrain. What Harold didn't mention, what the family never discussed, was that over 1,200 Chinese workers died building the Wetman railways. paid a third of white workers' wages, forced to handle dynamite in unstable tunnels, buried in unmarked graves when rock slides claimed their lives. Rachel found these details in historical archives, academic papers, old newspaper accounts. The Wetman fortune was built on bones. She cared for Harold for 10 months, learned his insulin schedule, gained his complete trust. When he updated his will to leave her $3 million for the wonderful care you've given me, Harold thought he was being generous. But Rachel thought he was paying a debt his family owed for 150 years. On March 15, 2021, Harold Wetman died in his sleep. Insulin overdose. His diabetes had been getting worse. Rachel was devastated, the family said. She tried everything to save him. No one suspected the extra units of insulin she had injected that night. No one questioned the trusted caregiver who had become like family. Rachel Foster had discovered her calling. Over the next 3 years, Rachel refined her technique. Each murder was tailored to the victim's existing conditions. Each death looked natural. Each family's fortune had a bloody history. Margaret Ashford, 91, died June 8, 2021. The Ashford textile fortune came from mills that employed children as young as 6, 12-hour shifts, locked doors. When a fire killed 47 child workers in 1886, the Ashfords collected insurance money and rebuilt. Margaret needed regular IV fluids. Rachel introduced a tiny air bubble into the line. Air embolism. At 91, with congestive heart failure, it looked like another stroke. Inheritance? $4.7 million. James Rothell, 84, died December 2nd, 2021. The Rothell sugar empire was built on Louisiana plantations. 300 enslaved people worked their fields. When slavery ended, they used convict leasing, essentially re-enslaving black men on fabricated charges. James had a weak heart. During a cardiac episode, Rachel injected potassium chloride into his IV. It stopped his heart within minutes. Just another heart attack in an 84-year-old man. Inheritance? $2.8 million. Eleanor Hancock, 88, died May 17, 2022. The Hancock fortune came from predatory lending in the 1920s. They targeted immigrant families with loans they couldn't read, then foreclosed on thousands of homes. Eleanor's grandfather bragged about owning half of Brooklyn by 1930. Eleanor was on morphine for cancer pain. Rachel simply increased the dose one night. He died of respiratory depression, a peaceful death for a terminal patient. Inheritance? $5.1 million. William Thornton, 90, died January 9, 2023. Thornton Coal Industries. Between 1890 and 1920, over 500 miners died in their tunnels. No safety equipment, children as young as 8 working underground. When workers tried to unionize, the Thorntons hired Pinkertons to massacre strike leaders. William had severe sleep apnea. One night, Rachel adjusted his CPAP machine and held a pillow over his face. Just another sleep apnea death. His son mentioned how peaceful he looked. Inheritance? $3.9 million. Each murder was perfectly timed, during a health crisis when death wouldn't be surprising. Using methods that mimic their conditions, Rachel would cry at each funeral, comfort the families, then quietly collect her inheritance. The families never suspected. Why would they? Rachel was the devoted caregiver who had given their loved ones such compassionate care. She was family. No autopsies were performed. These were old, sick people dying of natural causes. Their trusted caregiver was the one who called 911, who performed CPR, who sobbed as paramedics pronounced them dead. Rachel Foster had created the perfect murder pattern. She wasn't killing random millionaires. She was collecting historical debts with interest. Detective Linda Garrison of the NYPD Financial Crimes Division wasn't looking for a serial killer. She was investigating inheritance fraud when she noticed something odd in the New York Times obituaries. Beloved caregiver Rachel Foster appeared in 5 obituaries over 3 years. All wealthy victims. All died of natural causes. All left her substantial inheritances. At first, I thought it was just generous families, Garrison later testified. Rich people leaving money to caregivers isn't unusual, but 5 families? Nearly $20 million? That's a pattern. Garrison dug deeper. Inheritance records showed Rachel Foster had received $3.2 million from the Wetman estate, $4.7 million from the Ashford estate, $2.8 million from the Rothell estate, $5.1 from the Hancock estate, and $3.9 from the Thornton estate. Background checks revealed something disturbing. Rachel Foster hadn't existed before 2018. She'd legally changed her name from Rebecca Franklin. Before that, she had been Rachel Fitzgerald. 3 identities, 1 woman. The digital forensics team uncovered Rachel's obsessive research. Library records showed that she had checked out dozens of books. Dark History of American Industry, Blood Money, How Americans' Fortunes Were Built, The Forgotten Dead of the Transcontinental Railroad. Her browser history revealed hours spent on genealogy sites, historical archives, newspaper databases. She had researched each family extensively before taking them as patients. On an encrypted drive, investigators found what amounted to a manifesto. They live in luxury built on bones. Every silk sheet, every champagne toast, every million in their accounts, paid for with blood. The descendants enjoy wealth they never earned, built on the suffering they'd never acknowledged. Someone needs to balance the scales. The FBI took over the case. They needed to catch Rachel in the act. Enter Charles Pemberton, or rather, FBI agent Michael Torres playing Charles Pemberton. The Bureau created an elaborate backstory. An 89-year-old billionaire whose family fortune came from selling weapons to dictatorships, genocides funded by Pemberton guns. They leaked the story to society pages. To make sure Pinnacle Home Care knew Pemberton needed a caregiver, someone experienced, someone trustworthy. Rachel took the bait. For 8 months, she cared for Charles Pemberton while FBI agents watched through hidden cameras. They recorded her researching the fake weapon sales, documenting false atrocities, planning her approach. On November 3, 2023, cameras captured Rachel preparing a lethal dose of insulin. She approached the undercover agent's bed, syringe in hand. That's when the FBI moved in. The angel of death was finally caught. But her arrest would reveal something darker than anyone expected. During interrogations, Rachel revealed the personal tragedy that started her killing spree. Her parents, Korean immigrants, had lost their home to predatory lending in 2008. The company that foreclosed? Hancock Financial, the modern incarceration of Eleanor Hancock's empire. My father worked 18-hour days in that restaurant, Rachel told investigators. My mother cleaned offices at night. They saved for 20 years to buy that house. Then Hancock Financial sold them a loan they couldn't read with rates that tripled overnight. Her parents died within a year of losing their home. Her father from a heart attack. Her mother from an overdose that Rachel believed was suicide. I started researching the Hancocks. Found out they'd been destroying families like mine for a century. Then I realized they weren't the only ones. Every fortune in the city is built on someone's grave. The case divided public opinion. Some families were horrified to learn their dark histories. I had no idea, said Margaret, Ashford's granddaughter. Child labor? Dead kids? We thought great-grandpa was a visionary entrepreneur. Others knew but had rationalized it away. James Rothwell's grandson shocked reporters. Maybe she gave him the death he deserved. You know what he used to say? That slavery was a good business. He had Confederate flags in his study. Maybe this was karma. Several families announced that they would donate portions of their inheritances to descendants of those their ancestors had exploited. Others hired security and had elderly relatives move to protective care. The ethics professors had a field day. Was Rachel a monster or an avenging angel? Do descendants bear responsibility for ancestral crimes? Can murder ever serve justice? Rachel Foster's trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented her as a calculating killer who murdered 5 innocent elderly people. The defense could have justified murder but tried to explain her motivation. The jury took 3 days. And the verdict? Guilty on all counts. Life in prison without parole. In a final twist, Rachel had already donated all $19.7 million to various nonprofits, organizations supporting descendants of railroad workers, child laborers, enslaved people, and victims of predatory lending. Blood money returning to blood, she said at sentencing. But the story doesn't end there. Prison records show Rachel conducted study groups with other inmates on history, genealogy, and caregiving techniques. 3 nurses who attended her sessions have since been released. All 3 found jobs as caregivers. In the past year, 3 elderly millionaires have died under suspicious circumstances. Their caregivers were devoted. Their families trusted them completely. Each fortune traced back to historical exploitation. The FBI is investigating, but proving murder is nearly impossible when the killer knows exactly how to make death look natural. Rachel Foster may be in prison, but her ideology isn't. She didn't just kill for justice. She created disciples. When you invite a caregiver into your home, you're trusting them with everything. But Rachel Foster proved that sometimes the person wiping your brow is also calculating your death. And if your fortune was built on blood, maybe she thinks you deserve it. Subscribe to Wicket Crime Stories for more real cases that will make you question where justice ends and vengeance begins.